And now we're going to kick this over to my co-host of State of the Jungle, former PFF draft analyst, Evan McPhillips, to discuss round 2 of the NFL draft. Evan.
How we doing, Malik? I appreciate it. So, obviously, Michael Mayer coming off the board early. It was surprising to see him kind of fall to where he was. There was a lot of smoke there that maybe the Cowboys were going to be his floor at the end of the first round. The Raiders end up taking him. We talked a little bit about how efficient he was despite not having the high-end athleticism. We talked about how he was a good deep threat and a contested catch guy, but maybe not quite what you'd want out of a first-round profile for a tight end, athletically speaking. But the Raiders still get themselves a good player, guy who can offer them a lot in terms of blocking, in terms of being a little bit of help out there with Jimmy, and proceeding forward in the future with a reliable guy to fill in for a little bit more well-rounded skill set than what you had in a guy like a Darren Waller. Unfortunately, one of my favorite targets for the Bengals later in the second round also went off the board, and that is Sam Laporta. Really disappointed to see him come off the board because it seems like he was going to be such a good fit for what the Bengals need, right? You think about how they're getting all of these kind of too high shells to keep T. Higgins, to keep Jamar Chase from beating them deep because they're so threatened by that there were so many check down options available for guys like Samaje Perine, like Hayden Hurst. And how many of those were just catch and fall forward or catch and move forward for as many yards as you can get? Sam Laporta was different in that sense. He was a little bit smaller for a tight end and had the willingness as a blocker, but maybe wasn't quite as polished there. But as a receiver, man, he was a true threat after the catch, like basically a slot receiver in that tight end body with good enough deep speed to threaten them vertically, had some inside-out versatility, played all over for Iowa. And the really exceptional part about that is his yards after catch were 6.3. You're talking about you can get that plus some missed tackles. He had 20 broken tackles, which was the 5th most among all tight ends in PFF's 9 years of grading prospects. So that just tells you how, not generational, but how exceptional and how unique he is after the catch with that shake. And it was really exciting to kind of imagine him in that role as a guy who could take those checkdowns and not just get 6 or 8 yards, but really move past the sticks and kind of get to that second level and eat up some of that space. So very disappointing. Dave Lapham has talked about how he was kind of like higher up on their board and that they liked him. Disappointing to see, but there are other targets that you can get at that tight end position, either in the back end of the second or coming around in the third. One definitely that kind of fits that same kind of billing as Laporta is Tucker Kraft. I talked about 6.3 yards after the catch per reception for Sam Laporta. Well, Tucker Kraft was 7.7. Obviously, you're talking about a little bit of a drop-off in the terms of competition you're facing at South Dakota State, but to at least see that on top of his incredible athleticism, his body control, and does a good job of using his size. He's more of the underneath intermediate guy, not so much the deep speed. And the real concern with him is the drops. He had 10% drop rate in his career. So that's a little concerning in and of itself, but that's something you can work with over time, trying to improve that concentration, looking the ball in, making sure that you're not losing out on those catchable targets. So another guy who went off the board there that is probably not as much in the Bengals kind of wheelhouse right now was obviously Derek Hall. Just wanted to touch on him and pay respect to him and give him his flowers. It's a guy who like reminds me is coming from Auburn and the way that Carl Lawson was rocked up, that Derek Hall is just muscle on muscle, man. He's got biceps on his biceps, and he's just really kind of twitched up, springing off the snap, has that speed to power you're looking for, kind of more that linear athlete on the edge, not so much the side to side. Definitely needed some more counters to develop, and kind of is the same way that Myles Murphy didn't show market improvement year to year. Derek Hall was more or less kind of in that same kind of range for those years, but still a very talented edge rusher that I saw come off the board. So if we're looking at potential prospects, also I think I saw Matt Bergeron come off the board as well. He could have been a potential option for the Bengals if they wanted to address their right tackle situation. He is not the high-end traits or size guy necessarily, but he's one of those guys who's just consistently average, adequate, steady Eddie, has good processing, which you want on passing off any of the stunts, any of the movement by the defense. And he has experience at both tackle spots. So you get a guy with swing versatility that can also solve an immediate need. Would have really liked him for the Bengals coming up. But if we're looking at other guys that maybe might be there, I know DeJuan Jones is a bit of a polarizing prospect for people. But I think the back end of the second, as opposed to the first, where some people were originally having him, is a very good landing spot for him. He doesn't necessarily have that foot quickness, that athleticism that you'd want from a guy you might deem as a franchise tackle or blue chip prospect. But this guy is large and knows how to use his length, has big, powerful hands, and he can really, once he gets his mitts on you, he can really ride with you and get in your way and stop you in your tracks, a lot like an Orlando Brown. The only pause I have in that is it's fair to say that Orlando Brown, with his athletic profile, is a bit of an outlier, right? And it's dangerous chasing outliers. There's a reason that they are the outliers. You have a much better chance of hitting on these prospects that fall within the range of what we've seen from previous successful people at the position. Jones definitely does not have that athletic profile, but his size is gargantuan. This guy, I think he has a certificate. He is a certified giant out there on the field. So a little bit of the knock on him is that athleticism that we talked about, a little bit of the foot speed, and sometimes he can rely on the length a little bit too much and maybe get overextended, lose his balance in that regard. I think that's something that you can help coach, but at the same time, he needs to understand his limits, much like Orlando Brown does. And I think if he plays in that way, that he could be very useful for the Bengals as they come around on the back end. And then just looking at other potential options out there, Blake Freeland could be an interesting guy at the end of the round. Obviously has that size you're looking for from a tackle. He's another big guy. More slender, though. I think he measured in at about 308. He was under 310. You definitely see that in his game. He has the athleticism. He has the movement skills. He is able to get out in space and seek out contact and defenders to block. The concern with him is that he could use a little more sand in the pants. He could use a little bit more anchor ability against those kind of power rushers, which there is room to put weight on that frame, right? 308 pounds on I think 6'7" body. You've got room to grow there without getting bad weight, which is kind of what we see with maybe the fall of DeJuan Jones as reports come out that he is getting closer to 400. That weight is important because it can lead to injuries. If you're carrying bad weight, you're trying to play through a full NFL season on that. So you want to see guys definitely kind of seat in that comfortable range where you can feel comfortable that they have enough mass, they have enough strength, they have enough ability to anchor that way. But at the same time, they're also not overweight to where they're losing out on what athleticism they do have and also putting themselves at risk further for injury. So I definitely want to touch real quick just on the cornerbacks as well. Corner is an extremely valuable position, right? And we talked earlier, Dave brought up a great point about how the quarterback talent in the AFC is stacking up. When you look in the NFC and you're like, it's Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott, and after that, it's a lot of, you can make an argument for a couple different guys, but the talent in the AFC is far superior quarterback currently. And Dave talked about bringing on an edge rusher for that. You need corners as well. When you talk about next year, the only corners under contract for the Bengals are Mike Hilton and Cam Taylor-Britt. You are talking about potentially needing 3 cornerbacks going into next offseason. Now, you can address that through the draft and through through free agency, but you definitely want to get out in front of it. And I think we've seen that with the Bengals in the past, drafting a year ahead, doing the same thing with Myles Murphy. I think we could see that with the cornerback pick coming in the second or third round, where the Bengals definitely could use that. They've had to rely on their depth at corner. These guys are running all over the place, getting tangled up. They're those fast twitch athletes who can sometimes get those soft tissue injuries. You need depth at that position. You can't have a LaShawn Sims out there just trying to survive and getting picked on. Even Mike Hilton, as great as he is, was getting picked on in that Kansas City game. So it's going to be important, as we talked about before, getting younger, more athletic, and, of course, cheaper at these premium positions as some of these other Bengals and the old core starts to get paid, starts to transition a little bit into that new era for the Bengals. Some guys I like in the second round that are still on the board, obviously, Cam Smith out of South Carolina. Guy broke up or intercepted 15 different passes and 15 breakups and 4 interceptions on 70 targets in the last 2 years. You're talking about a guy with ball skills who can play the ball in the air like a wide receiver. That's a guy I want. He doesn't have the high-end traits, but he does seem to have the processing to help speed that up, right? There's ways to be quick, and that's either with speed to catch up on what you miss or to have the processing to speed up your process and anticipate as opposed to react, especially at defensive back. And I think that Cam Smith has that. Then another guy I kind of like, Tyreek Stevenson, obviously doesn't quite have the ball skills, but has all the physical measurements you want, has that physical aspect on the line of scrimmage. And then Julius Brents is also a guy I really like. He's got just crazy wingspan, is a bigger corner, but has quicker feet. He doesn't quite have the long speed, maybe not the burst coming out of breaks that you'd want, but he does have a crazy good athletic profile, quick feet, profiles well in zone. His big struggle was kind of against some bigger, stronger receivers. Despite his size, I think he weighed in at 198, was a little bit leaner, but on his massive frame, you've got room to pack on another 5 or 10 pounds of muscle. And if that's really the big drawback to his game, I'd be a really big fan of that pick on the back end of the second round for the Bengals.
Dave Lapham here, and every day I am grateful for my experience to have played professional football. As a player, I realize self-motivation, leadership, and appreciating your teammates are key. At First Star Logistics, you can use those same attributes to create the life you want for you and your family. Build your future by working hard like I did. You'll see results both on and off the field. Call First Star Logistics today and be part of our winning team.
Opportunity knocking.